kick in. Yeah. All right. It always wiggles around a little bit. Yeah, I think that's smooth now. So, yeah, hey everyone. Welcome to another installment of Friday, or thereabouts. I'll explain in a second. Let's just roll this intro and get right into it. So, hey everyone, and welcome. Happy Friday to everyone. I have to admit, though, right now it is not Friday for me, nor is it for our esteemed guest today, due to travel restrictions, as I'm sure, or travel-based restrictions, as I'm sure you can surmise at this point. I'm having to pre-record this, but yeah, doesn't matter. It was live at one point. It's live right now as you're hearing it. No one's watching it live. It's just being recorded. But hey, Glenn's a real person. So I have the wonderful opportunity to speak with the one and only Glenn Austin of Dash Core Group. How's it going, man?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm actually doing pretty well. Today is a decidedly high energy day, which means a little hectic, but mostly positive energy. So if I'm speaking a million miles an hour, it isn't just the espresso. It's also, the crazy day. How have you been?
Excellent. No, things are really good. I joined Dash Core Group 3 years ago as the CFO, and I'm sitting here today, 3 years later, and kind of happy to report to the network that we've never been in better financial shape. So I know we're going to kind of dive into that topic and what exactly that means. But as far as interviews go, and as far as how I feel about the health of Dash Core Group, I am really optimistic right
Yeah, so I did have a few pre-written down questions. Before that, you mentioned something about hiring and stuff. So Dashcore Group has been in the process of hiring new positions, and obviously this is where the podcast might lose some people because it's likely going to be 8 days from now that you're hearing this. So there might be something that has changed in the past 8 days, but regardless, they might, not everyone's privy to all that stuff anyway. So how are hiring processes going now? Like how many positions have you definitively hired, and how many are you still outstanding? And basically, how's it going? Talk about how hiring's going.
now. It's going well, right? So we've taken a deliberate approach. We've had two new people join in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
We do have a number of open positions, right? So I think as of today, June 10th, we have about 10 open positions. And what's really exciting about that is that out of those 10, seven are technical positions, right? So we
Hmm.
have, Android software developers, iOS, we have C++, JS, we have a technical product owner as well, kind of for the platform team. And then there are also three kind of non-technical roles, one of them being a business development manager that focuses on the LATAM market, and then kind of like a UI UX person for platform.
Hmm.
Some, would argue that overlaps with some of the technical positions out there, but it's really exciting to kind of be part of this organization that's really growing and growing quickly, right? So we don't want to hire 10 people in 1 month. We want to take a deliberate, slow approach and make sure we get the right candidates in for the right jobs. But overall, even with this market correction in the last 2, 3 months, we're in really good shape financially where we can kind of continue executing in terms of hiring. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So this is where we get to like, because Dashcore Group is it's his own company, and all the internal dealings of it are not necessarily always immediately public to the public. It's just like talking about, oh, this person joined, this person didn't, and then like the rest of the public doesn't. It's not like it's tweeted out from the main Twitter account. Of course, not a lot was tweeted out from the main Twitter account because it was taken offline for a little while. But so for those who have not been educated, how many positions did DCG have at its bear market bottom? And then how many positions is it seeking to ultimately recover from this, let's just say like this year, but let's just say in the foreseeable future?
So bear market bottom, I would say we were at around 25
Hmm.
staff that were working for us. Right now we're sitting at 27 with 10 open positions, right? So once we
Mm-hmm.
hire all of those, we'll come up to 37. I'm assuming steady state would probably be 40 or so, meaning on top of the 10, we'll probably be adding three more.
Like
So I
marketing
can see us
managers, maybe.
yeah, someone within marketing, right? Arden or Miss
Mm-hmm.
Dash, who joined the last couple of months. I know she has a lot on her plate, and she will need
Hmm.
another individual there. And then maybe another business development person or someone within the technology team as well. So I could see us at 40. And the run rate associated with that 40 for those 40 individuals is, a break even point. And I usually describe it in the price of Dash. It would be around $120 dollars per Dash, right? So even here, after kind of like the bear market correction where we were, I think, at a peak of about $475 per Dash, even at 170 or wherever we are as of June 10th, we're way above that break even, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more exciting is that we've put away a lot of reserve over the last 3 4 months, right? We were selling continually into that bull run up, so we've put away about $2.5 million now in USD. About 2 million of that is allocated purely towards compensation. So let's say tomorrow, a week from now, when this podcast airs, right on June, what is it, 18th? Let's say the price,
Ooh.
I don't want to jinx it, but let's say the price goes down to 60, right? At 60, we would be, basically able to sustain Dash Core Group with 40 individuals for, a year and 2 months, basically, right? Which is a really long time before we would have to make a single change. So overall, like our finances are in great shape.
Yeah, and so this is where like the precise world of finance enters the imprecise, wild hurricane thunderdome world of speculative investing in a emergent asset class, which is where we're at here too, which I'm sure is the ultimate nightmare for you to deal with. But hey, you applied for the job, not me. But as I would say, we don't know where the price of Dash is going to be a day from now, much less a year from now. However, cycles go up and down, and we get to see market trends, kind of like estimate certain things. And so, like you mentioned, a year and a half, and 2017 to 2021 was over double that, almost three times that. Is in between the the bull cycle and then the evil bear winter that Dash had to go through, or the whole space had to go through before stuff started going on. So it seems like there's a little bit of a gap in between that as far as like survivability. So basically, what are you do you really do you think that Dash Core Group can grow to these 40 or so individuals and maintain that level, maintain that staffing level through a bear market and then back up? And obviously, there's a few data points that might, or a few estimations that might come into this, whatever that might be come into whatever your answer is. But for example, like how high might the bull market go this year specifically for Dash? Because who cares what Bitcoin or Ethereum does, for example,
Right.
is and also how low, like the bear market low this last time was 38. Some people say $33, whatever it was. It's like in the 30s, very briefly, but still. And so, where might the next bear market low be? The break even point of 120, back down to like 60 or below or something, or is there an anticipation of several $1,000 valuation at the top and then the ability to convert some of that to something like fiat in order to then sustain through? Anyway, that was an extremely long-winded question. I apologize for it, but basically, these 40 employees, what do you think are the sustainability prospects of getting through to the next bull market without changing anything, any
No, great
staffing?
question, right? So our reserve right now, like I mentioned, is anywhere between 6 to 7 months of compensation. I would love to get that up to 1 year.
Hmm.
Beyond that, I wouldn't want to, so that would be doubling our reserve to, let's say, 4 to 5 million. Beyond that, I don't want to build a huge reserve because we have to remember that for every dollar we put away in a reserve, we do have to pay taxes on that
Mm.
to both US government and the state, right? So we want to maintain we've been very tax efficient from that perspective. And the second thing is, I don't want to pile up this huge, USD or fiat reserve when there are needs right now within Dash Core Group and needs that the Dash network has in terms of deploying funds, right? Like, I
Mm.
think everyone is clamoring for marketing funds right now, right? Everyone is saying, hey, where are marketing dollars going? Why isn't there a marketing proposal up? There will be a marketing proposal coming today, and I'll be posting it to the network on June 10th.
Ooh.
And there'll be a business development proposal, but those proposals won't be for a large amount of money, right? Like
Mm.
within marketing, as you know, we could spend 1 million, 2 million easily on initiatives, right?
Mm.
So I know Arden is kind of working on a lot of those things. She has kind of a minimum amount that she needs to, basically stabilize the marketing team. And that'll come out within that marketing proposal, some of those details, and she'll be answering any questions people have. But I want to be kind of cognizant of the fact that, hey, we do want to put away money into a reserve and keep that for the bear market. But at the same time, like every dollar that comes in, we can't just be putting that away for a rainy day. We need to be deploying it right now, today, on high impact things, that will be positive for the Dash, right? So it's
Yeah.
striking that balance where, hey, if a bear market comes, we want to be able to at least remain sustainable, but at the same time, not just being completely risk averse and going back into the shell and saying, hey, we're only accumulating money for the rainy day. We need to spend money now on behalf of the Dash network. And it is interesting to kind of look at overall what's going on in the ecosystem. You have many coins that don't have really development teams
Mm.
or marketing dollars, and then you have some projects that have millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, right,
Or
associated,
possibly more.
or possibly billions, right? So it's kind of an interesting. We're kind of in the middle between not having any money or having tens of millions or hundreds of millions. But it's not always about like the money. It's how you end up using it and
Of
not
course.
wasting it, right? So that's the most important thing. How do you allocate the funds to make sure you're making the highest impact and at the same time putting away enough for a rainy day? And it's so hard, like you said, given the
Yeah.
volatility of the space. I have to tell you, in the last 3 years, like planning has been this continual process that just needs refinement, and Ryan and I kind of bat around ideas and continually refine them every month or two around like where we are, how we think about where we are, and what we need to spend funding on. And obviously, then we go back to the management team and to the board as well and inform them. And obviously, they also have some input into that whole process. So it's gotten a lot better than it was when I had joined initially 3 years ago, and all of our reserve was in Dash, right?
Hmm.
I think we've worked through some of those kinks.
Yeah. And so basically, you're probably pretty confident that you can make it through to the next bear market and not really change staffing for those reasons. Like not change normal full-time staff.
Yeah, that's right. I am pretty confident. Final.
Hmm.
Then again, there's like, famous last words, right?
Yeah.
A week from now, the price is at $10. But no, I'm just kidding. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm pretty sure we're flexible enough where, if the price tomorrow were to go to $40, well, we probably wouldn't hire those 10 open positions. And with the current staff of 27, we can still deliver whatever we're looking to deliver this year. Or we hire 3 or 4 of those positions and then reevaluate where we are a quarter from now. So, no, I am pretty confident that we have enough funding to survive the next bear market. And that's assuming we are going into it.
Yeah. Which, considering market cycles, yeah, I guess at some point the markets might even out a little bit. But again,
Yeah,
I'm not a TA guy or anything.
yeah,
Now, one last little aside on that, I'm not a huge, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination expert on U.S. tax law and things like that. So if you have reserves, that's counted as profit for the company, right? Or funds you have and you have to pay on that. Now, unrealized gains, like say you make income in Dash and do not convert it, does that trigger a taxable event just by receiving it, or does it only trigger it when you sell it? Or is it a double trigger to where you receive it, you got to pay taxes on what you receive, and then when you convert to dollars, any fluctuation you have to pay taxes on that too at
Right.
that point?
So it would be double, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't exactly work that way. So the way it works is when the funds came in from the super block, that's counted as revenue,
Yeah,
right?
and you have to sell at that point, kind of. You have to pay it.
Um, and then so I don't sell the Dash immediately. When we receive the super block, what we do is we sell that Dash over the course of a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that's after using some of that Dash to pay expenses, right? So
Of
pay
course.
some of our staff in Dash, pay various invoices. So what happens is we get some revenue, right? We have some expenses, and we generate either a net income or net loss. If it happens to be net income, we would be paying taxes on it at the end of the fiscal year. Our fiscal year ends June 30th.
Mm-hmm.
Then in addition to that, so that's one tax component, right? You pay tax on your net income. And we're pretty efficient there because what we bring in net income usually over the long run will be zero, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once our reserve has stabilized, we're going to be spending whatever we get. So our taxes will be pretty low there. As far as the capital gains tax, we pay a gain or a loss on any Dash. We basically, if Dash comes in at $100 and we sell it 110, we'll pay capital gains on the $10 delta, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's just a gain. Fortunately or unfortunately, we had a large capital loss carryover from previous years, right? So during the bear market, we used to sell Dash at a loss. So now we can use that loss to offset any gain that we experienced this year.
Mm.
So in terms of that, we're also not going to be paying a lot of capital gains taxes on Dash because we have that carry forward, basically, that loss carry forward. So overall, we're pretty, from a tax perspective, we're pretty efficient. And in terms of context, for every $100 we bring in revenue, over the last 3-4 years, we've paid $2 in taxes. So that's just context.
Yeah. So what, 2% basically?
Yeah, 2%, exactly.
And obviously individual incomes and stuff are still, if you individually gets paid, they pay whatever they individually do on that. But as far as DCG as an entity is only 2% about.
Yeah.
Yeah, which a lot of people are salty about taxes, which obviously I who isn't, but 2% is not that bad as far as things go.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty tax efficient setup.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah. Now we're talking about the staffing and spending it and stuff when it goes up, and then not spending as much or whatever. Uh, Now we talk about the sustainability of the, had to go down to about 25 employees, and then going up to like 27 now, up to 37, hopefully somewhere around 40, and then being able to maintain that 40 through the bear market. Now the
Right.
coming bear market.
If
Now,
they're
yes. Now, just a real quick aside on that. Do you think that there might not be?
I think there might not be.
Hmm.
Um, I did think things were pretty frothy in April and May,
Yeah.
and price went down from 470 to wherever we are now.
Was it really up to
Um,
470?
I think it was.
Wow.
I think,
That's
yeah,
not
it
even.
really was around
I should have
475, I want
should
to
have
say. That
bought
was
some
the
new furniture then.
top.
Yeah.
um, can the price go down from here? Yes, it can.
Yeah.
Do I believe there's a high chance of it going sub 100? Maybe it'll dip below then in some type of like panic, but I think it'll be bouncing back. And right now, the natural level is 100 or 120. But then again, like, that's pure speculation on my part, right?
Yeah.
I don't, just like nobody else knows, I don't know. I need to, when we do planning, I have to plan for a range of scenarios. Right now, my range is, hey, if we're at 50, this is what we do. And if we're at 350, this is what we do, right? So there's that big range in terms of probability. Below 50, yes, it can happen, but it'll have to hit 100 before it gets there. So I'm not planning for it until kind of the price shifts significantly from where it is today.
Yeah, so this will obviously be fun to look back on as the market does whatever the hell it wants over the future, and things will be great, crazy. My expectation is that we hit a temporary like Elon Musk in China initiated slam on the brakes of the bull market, and that the bull market will continue throughout this year, at least until like around October, November, if not all the way till the holidays. And then 2022 and on, we're going to see the bear market until, let's say, 2025 again when it comes up. These things are cyclical. Right. So that's kind of what I was thinking is you hit, maybe Dash goes to 1,000, 3,000 or whatever at the end, by the end of the year. And then it dumps back down over time. And then it's not, basically, can you make it until 2025 was kind of thing. But anyway, the question being about the staffing, do you anticipate temporary positions being open for DCG, meaning we're flushed with money because Dash went to 780 or Dash went to 1780 or whatever, but we know that this is not sustainable when the prices go to something a little bit more reasonable. So we're not going to hire people that we have to lay off, but we're going to hire people temporarily or pay staff temporarily for while we can, and then just the contract sunsets, and it's all very expected and non-disruptive, right? Are you anticipating any of those?
I mean, for me, as I plan things out, that sounds really appealing, right? Temporary staffing for someone within finance is really appealing because it introduces this variable cost structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the price goes up, we introduce more temporary staffing, and when it goes down, you can dial down that expense really easily. So I love the idea. It's more around, can we identify the proper resources who do want to work on a temporary basis and make a difference to our project, one, and then two, how do we manage them properly without, taking the attention of the people on our technical team from their day-to-day tasks, right? So it's more of like a management decision, and from the perspective of how do we manage these temporary staffing or outsourcing type initiatives? How do we make sure they're properly doing the work? Someone has to interact with them. Someone does have to sink in a month or two, probably, of training with them. So there's that sunk cost as well. But I personally, I'm a champion of the idea in terms of I love to push that idea down and see how people react to it, because from a cost perspective, there would be nothing better for us than to have that type of structure in place where we can dial up the expenses when needed and then dial them down if the price were to go down.
Yeah, and just not even modify the ask for the treasury. Just kind of keep it when it goes up. Oh, there's extra. Yeah, that'd be nice. That sounds. Yeah. Now we talk about. It seems like the sustainability thing, at least from DCG's perspective, is pretty well settled at this point, and I think that'll make a lot of people feel a lot better since there have been concerns that like platform is delayed because there weren't enough people able to be hired, and now just knowing that that's kind of a temporary hiccup of the 2017 run up and no structures in place to take advantage of it really, and then this harsh bear market that got extra dipped by the like the salt lending liquidation and other things. And it's like certain things, okay, but this won't happen again. So that makes people feel better. Yeah. Now we move on to sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I look back to December 2018 and December 2019, kind of when that salt liquidation was happening. And it was a really stressful time, right? We were sustainable. We figured out a way to get through on the other end. But I'd be lying if I say I wasn't stressed at those moments, right? It was,
yeah, it sucked. It sucks sometimes,
Not fun. It was not fun. It's a lot more fun today.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now we're talking about another fun subject, which is regulation. The first thing is, because I know you've been more involved with this kind of a thing. Well, I'm sure, we could talk to Ryan about it and stuff too, but Ryan's busy doing Ryan things. Are there any updates to Dash's preconceived notion of being what was called like a privacy coin or an anonymity enhanced cryptocurrency that has caused certain exchanges to delist it, or certain, yeah, basically certain regulatory entities to consider it to not be kosher, for lack of a better term. Is there any update on the privacy coin definition front?
So there are a lot of we've done a lot of efforts. We've engaged with a lot of regulators and a lot of enforcement agencies as well. So we have a policy of kind of an open door. We want to get the word out on what private send is, and we've now renamed private send. Right? It's no longer named private send within the wallet. It's now called CoinJoin.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, what we have on the Dash network in terms of privacy is non-custodial CoinJoin.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of other networks have non-custodial CoinJoin as well. Ours works pretty well for what it is,
To be
and it's
fair, a
not
lot better, because I have been using some other ones this week, and
okay.
it's a little rough. Let me tell you that.
Fair enough. And it's, because our transaction fees off on our network are reasonable compared to some other networks out there,
It should remain
it's not that
unnamed.
expensive, right, to do CoinJoin. But
Yes.
from a technological standpoint, it works exactly the same in terms of it being non-custodial. So I think when we meet with regulators, just opening their eyes to that has been really interesting because they thought you are literally privately sending funds, like, let's say you would be doing on Monero or whatever the case may be
Mm-hmm.
on like some other, privacy blockchain that, is not non-custodial based, right? So that's been interesting to them. I think it's more about education at this point. And we've definitely gotten the word out. We've had some really good conversations with people who understand it, who are now understanding it on the regulators end,
Mm-hmm.
within both the Department of Justice or FinCEN and some other regulatory bodies. We Dash Japan, interestingly enough, about a year ago, submitted a proposal to the Dash network,
Yeah, I
right,
remember that.
to get relisted in Japan. And Yosuke, we've been working pretty closely with him. There's now a prestigious Japanese firm that has now kind of penned a memorandum on CoinJoin on the Dash network, and essentially they've concluded, from a AML KYC risk perspective, Dash is no different from Bitcoin, right? So we've been able to take that, and we're working through speaking to some Japanese exchanges and the regulators there just to see what it would take to relist Dash in that country. Again, things in that market move slowly. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't expect anything to happen there until maybe the end of this year or maybe even next year. But overall, I am optimistic because I've heard a regulator within the Japanese market say, I don't understand why we used to define you as a privacy coin. You're not a privacy coin. You have non-custodial coin join. Like that's a safety issue. A lot of other networks have the same thing. So I think people are now coming around and understanding it.
It just
I
take a
think
while.
it takes a while, and I think it's a reputation issue where 7 years ago when we were the first network to implement
Dark
non-custodial coin join,
coin, you know.
X coin, dark coin had
Mm-hmm.
negative connotations. So we're kind of like fighting just literally a reputation as opposed to having regulators come in and look at the underlying technology and understand how it works and what the various impacts are. And frankly, I'm already kind of seeing the conversation shift away from, privacy coins because that necessitates almost having the regulators define what it is and it isn't. And that's really difficult to do because privacy
Mm-hmm.
is non-binary. And
Yeah.
more towards, hey, there are all these technologies out there, be it like, the Lightning Network or, a burn and redeem model or CoinJoin. What
Yeah.
are some ways in which we can risk score various activities on the network, right? Like a $5 or $10 transaction that's completely shielded from a risk perspective is a lot lower than a transparent one for $1 million, right? So it's not what network it takes place on or what technology it uses. It's really about what are the various risks in terms of KYC, AML? Who are the actors on the other ends? Is it going through a hosted wallet or a self-hosted wallet. There's just like so many dimensions and aspects to it that the regulators are now understanding that, almost defining a privacy coin and trying to base policy and regulation on that just seems like a completely futile and silly exercise.
Yeah, for sure. Regarding language, obviously, educating regulators seems to be completely irrespective of whatever stuff is called. However, renaming private send or dark send, as it used to be called, or probably I don't know if it was even called CoinJoin before it was called dark send, but it's back to CoinJoin now.
Right.
Obviously, that in order for that to be on anyone's radar to even change had to have been a meaningful thing. And I have heard rumor that the word privacy in certain languages, for example, in Japanese, is problematic to say the least. There's a very negative connotation to it.
Right.
On that, so two questions on that. First, has the unbranding to CoinJoin had any effect yet, or has it been enough time or to have any reaction to that? And so yeah, first for
No,
that one.
no, hasn't been enough time yet. But I was in two calls with regulators where we explained that, hey, private send is essentially non-custodial coin join.
Mm-hmm.
And they would turn around and say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it's called private send. You're obviously doing something where you're privately sending and nobody on the network can see it. Otherwise, why would you call it private send? And it'd be like, gotcha, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, okay, this happened more than once. No matter how much we're explaining it, they're saying it's obviously private because it's called private send. So because of that, there was just a need to rename. In
Mm-hmm.
addition to what you said around the translation of private into various languages, in particular in Japanese, it you know seems to connotate nefarious activity or something along those
Yeah, like
lines. So
dark or
yeah,
underground or something.
right,
Now,
exactly.
I have sort of in writing about this kind of thing, sort of taken to trying to avoid using the word private or privacy just because in the I believe privacy is a human right, but in the context of the crypto space, it seems to have, it's not just that like it's a bad word, it just has some very specific connotations that just are not like, you just instantly think like, oh, it's the next Monero or Zcash or something, when it's like, well, there's a different level to that. There's a different connotation. So, is there a better word, in at least in English, that could be used to talk about the inherent need to not have your transactions exposed to just the general public, which might compromise your safety? So, for example, it's a little clunky. You said use confidentiality, kind of like how Bitcoin has, or and Monero employs as well, like confidential transactions. That's like a thing, which so like maybe make sure that you can transact with confidentiality or something like that. It sounds like a little bit more of a professional term. Is there a term out there that you think would be useful to use to kind of not
So
confuse?
you said the word that we use in our
Yeah.
conversations with regulators, which is safety,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's about user safety. It's about, if I have, 100 Dash in my wallet, let's say, and it's worth whatever it is now, $17,000, right? And I go to transact through an app or, at a grocery store, and the person can easily see that my balance from the address I sent the money to is 17,000. His cousin Vinny might be meeting me in an alleyway, outside within 5 minutes of the bat.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So for us, it's about safety, right? So we've updated a lot of the private send, or now we're calling it coin join, materials to kind of say, hey, this is consumer grade privacy,
Yeah.
or safety. Use it because you don't want your neighbor to know what you're spending your money on, or for your employer to know what political party you might be contributing to, or for the hotel clerk not to know that you have this amount of crypto balance, right? Nobody wants to open up their bank account so that everyone can see how much money they have in it, right? So people understand that from a safety perspective, privacy is important. For some reason, within crypto, privacy is problematic. When
Mm-hmm.
Apple does a privacy preserving feature, it's applauded, right? So there is that disconnect. I agree. We
Yeah.
try to focus on the user safety aspect of that when we speak to regulators. And then, we also mentioned that with non-custodial CoinJoin for, industrial type of, tracking bad guys or state actors that are terrible or whatever, they typically use, more advanced analytics, things that are available through chain analysis companies, right?
Yeah.
So they have that option available to them to stop the bad guys essentially.
Yeah, and in the legacy financial world, I'm sure some things like that happen as well, where if someone gets $1 million stolen from his bank account or from a bank in like bales of cash, whether or not they've marked those bills or whatever, at some point, if you see $1 million show up at a different bank, you're like, wait a second. And
Yeah,
it's like similar jurisdictions or possible jurisdictions based on the plate on the car. Like, you figure things out even though you can't connect directly those transactions. And the same thing. So
right.
someone
Mhm.
steals your 150 dash, you cry, of course. It shows up like two installments of 75 dash on other exchanges in a
Yeah,
jurisdiction where there was some sort of an IP address correlation, and then they
right.
have some questions about that. That's kind
Yep.
of, that's a different thing than like for example, every once in a while, I use when the fees are low enough, I use Ethereum in some capacity, and it just blows my mind that your one address has all your Ethereum and all your tokens just go to that
Right.
one address, and it's just all there. And then I was using, I think it was uh, Thor swap or Thor, the Thor chain
Sure
swap,
thing.
and
Sure.
when it says when you're opening your wallets or whatever, it just says these little things, and you just when you like click to open your wallet, it literally just sends you a link to the block explorer of that address. And I'm just like I'm great. It's great that it works that way,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like literally, it's just like how much money do you have, and then they just ask you to look at the billboard on the street. See,
Yeah.
that'll tell you how much money you have. It's like like the like today's richest citizens of Portland, Oregon, or whatever, and there's a big
Right.
billboard, and that see there you're on the list right there. It's like
Yeah.
I it's mind blowing to me that this is well, it'll change very soon. I think a lot of major changes are going to happen to coins like Ethereum, but also the UTXO based ones like Bitcoin, etc. In
Mhm.
the future, just because this is not acceptable. No one's going to live like this, not with
Yeah.
real money.
Yeah, and I think with Taproot even, the latest Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
update, they've had a number of privacy enhancements
Mm-hmm.
or features added into that upgrade. So it's interesting. It'll be a tug and pull between regulators and industry. And what would be best would be like some bright lines from regulators saying, "Hey, this is how we view non-custodial coin join today," and that
Mm-hmm.
would be helpful. Because right now there doesn't seem to be any type of cohesive regulatory framework through which to evaluate any of this. Right? A lot of people are just flying blind.
Yeah, which then turns it to we're talking about the ultimate gotcha thing is saying, well, we're not a privacy coin. Why is it called private then? Ooh, checkmate,
Right,
like
exactly.
that thing. So then you rename it to CoinJoin because that's
Yeah,
literally what it is, and that hopefully helps. However, I'm just thinking the next the next step people might say is, yeah, I mean you can mix on Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, but it's completely separate from the protocol. With Dash, the incentivized nodes that everyone pays to run, the master nodes, are active participants in this mixing process, and not just the ones that choose to, all of them. They just all participate. So you can't say that this is just a special feature on the side if you guys are involved in using it. So,
so that's really
yeah.
interesting. That touches upon like this thing that the government has mentioned around, hey, but your implementation is built in.
Yeah.
And what does that mean, right? So you actually do have full nodes, full node wallets on Bitcoin that also do coin join, like the Dojo wallet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, with master nodes, like what if we had two different executable files, that separated coin join out? Like
Mm.
What does built-in mean? What does it mean to be part of a protocol? What if we were to publish the software in two or three different packets where it was optional or opt-in, right? Does that even make a difference, right? And at the end of the day, it doesn't, right?
I mean,
It's
I don't think so.
what happens is it's either you have non-custodial coin joining, you can't. And our main argument there was if FinCEN wanted to, they can literally implement CoinJoin on any public,
Hmm.
right? Through because CoinJoin isn't like a special feature where you need to, actually take the Bitcoin protocol and upgrade it or roll out a hard fork.
Hmm.
It's the restriction of a current Bitcoin transaction, right? And that restriction is around, you can only send some of the inputs to outputs that haven't never been used or to addresses that have never been used, and you can only use like identical amounts of, let's say,
Mm.
zero point 0.1 or 1 Bitcoin or whatever the case may be. But essentially, FinCEN can itself, or any government body out there, can build a CoinJoin wallet and
Hmm.
have it run on any public blockchain right
Yeah.
now. So if you can do that, it's kind of like any third party on any network can do that. It's kind of ridiculous to say, oh, but this one is different, right?
Yeah.
Like, how is it different? It's not.
I would agree. Now, that of course I would agree that we shouldn't care that it's called private send or that it's even a privacy coin or whatever. I would agree that doesn't even matter. But I guess if you're like Dash Core Group is shipping the wallet that has this built in, some regulators might say that that's an endorsement by Dash itself of this feature that they view to be dark. And then on the other hand, Dash Car Group ships software which I guess forces, whatever you want to call it, has masternodes by default participate in the mixing process. And so, do you foresee a case? Well, first off, do you foresee a case where regulators have issue with those two things and say your privacy coin, as long as Dash Core Group, the core protocol, the main core node ships with CoinJoin in it, or and the main masternode software, the unedited masternode software, like just as it comes from core, it makes you participate in mixing. First, do you foresee a situation where regulators might decide that those things are an issue that can't be surmounted? And in that case, would Dashcore Group ever decide to comply and remove those things and have third parties do Dash's special coin join features as like an add-on, kind of like the way Bitcoin Cash does it?
Well, knowing the Dash community, if regulators ever came to Dash Core Group and said, "Hey, you're basically endorsing it," we'll say, "Hey, we're one of many entities."
Mm-hmm.
But if we were to remove it, I'm pretty sure a proposal immediately would pop up on the Dash network saying, "Hey, we're going to implement CoinJoin in our wallet as a third party, be it, Dash Next or someone from Dash Incubator," and then you'd have CoinJoin there, and it would
Yeah.
be identical functionally. It would just be a different organization under the Dash
Mm.
network that's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually don't foresee this becoming a problem. I think the attention of the regulators is going away from CoinJoin. I think they're realizing that's not necessarily a threat, particularly with like enhanced privacy happening through, be it Mimblewimble on Litecoin or, even within DeFi, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
decentralized exchange protocols as well are going to be garnering a lot of attention
Of
from an
course.
AML KYC perspective from the regulators. So it would be nice to get something from the regulators saying, okay, this is how we view non-custodial coin join and the various flavors of it. I don't foresee that becoming actually a statement because I think they'll quickly recognize from a KYC AML risk, there are a lot of other things they should be focusing on. There are a lot higher priority and higher risk than coin join.
Yeah. So that kind of brings it, and that does kind of remind me of, I guess, a criticism when of Dash from the privacy groups has been, oh, Dash has weak privacy, doesn't work, it's breakable or something, which I think is, it's a load of nonsense. Except the truth in that load of nonsense is, if the not truth is, from my understanding, if you do good practices, I can mix funds and send it, and you don't know where it went, or if you received it, you didn't know where it came from. That's pretty rock solid. The thing is when you, like you, for example, you steal a bunch of money, and then every step of the way to keep that hidden is so much, even if it's possible, I'm sure, but it's so much more work and more variables and stuff than something like, let's just say, like a Zcash, where you just like shield it and it just like disappears, kind of. And so it just makes it more, it like the who's a threat is going to take the path of more resistance to not just like hiding how much they have or where they're sending money, but just like hiding everything. And it's going to be just so much more work, more variables involved in doing it with Dash than with other projects, and they'll just, the regulatory attention will then move over there. But
Yeah.
on this subject of regulatory attention, from DCG's perspective at least, this has been a crazy year in that, like, I mostly keep my head down and work, and a lot of what I want in decentralized digital money is in Dash. So that's mostly what and I see other projects. I'm like, yeah, okay, I look into that ad. That's not interesting. There's been a couple things that have been interesting recently that have not been Dash. And one of those is the advent of DeFi, beyond just, the nonsense of, why don't you have like a food shaped rainbow token that then you can like stake on another one and provide liquidity for another one, and then just make insane gains until the whole thing crashes. Like, not that stuff, but just the idea of, back in the old days, people used Shapeshift to swap their tokens around without an account, and pretty soon regulators cracked down on that, and it became more traditional exchangey and more regulated. And now we have decentralized exchanges that actually work on a few levels. For example, Uniswap, which works on just Ethereum and Ethereum-based tokens, but is like a allegedly completely decentralized exchange, permissionless exchange. And now we have Thorchain with ThorSwap and other affiliates working on that does that cross-chain, to where now you have a situation like Shapeshift, except no one runs it. You can't. People run nodes all over the world. If one jurisdiction shuts down some nodes or says you can't, you need AML KYC, they can just shut down those nodes, put them in a different country, and the whole thing kind of works. And it's like back to the Wild West kind of thing because of this. So because of this, is it more of DCG's priority to focus on getting onto where the future is going? Has it shifted more towards that rather than the old exchanges that are super regulated, that it might be a ton of work for not very many results? Has there been a shift in DCG attention towards that, or does it still remain the same of trying to get on the older exchanges?
I think from a DCG perspective, it has been getting off to the older exchanges. But again, I think we're obviously reevaluating whatever initiatives we have within business development. I'm going to punt on this one. I'll encourage to ask Ernesto,
Yeah, of course.
who's head of BD, as to like what the strategy is there. I actually, frankly, haven't been plugged into those conversations around Dash, Wrap Dash, or Dash on some DeFi exchanges, or even how an integration into Thorchain would work, or any of that. I'm happy to just, when I don't know something, I'm happy to say I don't know.
Yeah, well, then that hits to the sort of next level of this is we're hitting an area where cryptocurrencies cannot structurally be regulated as in the same way as centralized banking systems can, and therefore they haven't. I mean, user behavior surrounding cryptocurrencies has been regulated, whereas this is illegal to use. You owe taxes on that, whatever government said to what the individual does. They can't really control it themselves. And more importantly, they've gone after the choke points, which have been centralized exchanges, where this is a business, this is registered, this does deal with bank accounts and such, and they've been able to regulate those. Now we're moving to the decentralized area where the actual exchange of things is in a decentralized way, and you cannot really stop it, but you can have a regulatory opinion or something on that. And so what do you foresee as the regulatory response to this kind of thing being? Do you think they're just going to let DeFi do its thing and just watch who uses it and then try to make sure those people pay their taxes? Do you think they're going to make sure if you want to run some sort of DeFi infrastructure or stake, if they find it out you need a money services business license, and then, you can get arrested if you don't or whatever like that? What do you think regulators are going to do with DeFi? Or do you think they still have no idea at this point?
I think at this point they're starting to become aware of it. I know FATF provides
Mm-hmm.
some guidance on these things. I'm aware of some rules that they are drafting on their end. I think DeFi in general will be getting a lot of attention in the back half of 2021 and then going into 2022. I think kind of FinCEN is most likely shifting its attention to DeFi as well. I know,
Mm.
they kind of wrote that NPRM around self-hosted wallets and, choking the centralized exchanges back in December. I don't know if there's going to be any follow-up on that proposed rulemaking with an actual rule, just because that was done under the previous administration, right? I don't know if that will be a priority with this one. But I do think there will be more focus on DeFi. Um, I am curious as to what their stance will be. I've
Mm.
heard rumors that they might even, hold software developers accountable in certain instances,
Wow.
which would be a pretty heavy-handed approach.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors of that. I don't think that that will be necessarily enforceable, but we'll see. It's kind of the Wild West right now, and I'm pretty sure regulation is coming. A lot of these DeFi um, exchange protocols and projects also have compliance individuals, and they have lawyers as well. And I'm sure those people are working through the various issues with the regulators too. So at
Mm.
least there is communication between the industry and the actual regulators. So hopefully, whatever comes down in terms of regulation is, considered and informed and doesn't come from, just hearsay or stories or narratives that are false, but actually, people take the time to understand the technology and understand both the benefits and, how bad actors can, be prevented from using it, right? Because that, I think at the end of the day, just legitimate uses of cryptocurrency behooves everyone. You never want it to be exploited by the bad guys, so that's where I kind of come out on it. But then again, it's always a question of, as you look to crack down on the bad guys, so to speak, how do you make sure you don't violate personal liberties or personal freedoms of everyone who's actually using it for totally legitimate uses, right? And that's the tension. And it'll be interesting to see what regulators come up with. So that's a long-winded answer, but the answer is yes. I think DeFi is in the crosshairs of regulators
Yeah.
based on some conversations that I've had over the last 2 weeks.
That'll be really fascinating to see what they do, because so far with CFI, they've done very little, all things considered, and they're just starting to do a lot more now, or think about doing a lot more. And it's taken like a decade to do that, to be honest. It's taking a long time. And obviously it's going to be faster with DeFi, but the thing is, like, when you talk about criminalizing open source code, like creation of that, or that, first off, that's just going to make developers become anonymous slash pseudonymous. And it's also just like, what, you can't like write a program anymore. This is ridiculous. It Then you could possibly crack down on node operators, but just make them register or something. If it's too difficult, they'll just run it in different countries, and then you might ban the use of that in your jurisdiction, which would be, I mean, that'd be suicide, kind of. But then you just have to, like, what happens if I decide to start staking liquidity on Thorchain? Like, let's say I have like a half a Bitcoin or something like that, for argument's sake, and I just like put it on there. Like, if it's DeFi, they cannot KYC me on the way in or on
Right.
the way out. They can't do it at all protocol level. But then what do they do? They just say anything you make off of that, you just report on your taxes and just sort of like trust you do that. And if you're a big enough fish, they audit you or something. And like, yeah, it's a lot of interesting ideas on like how this is going to take place.
Yeah. I don't envy them. if I were a regulator, and even with I've worked in cryptocurrency space for 3 years now and dabbled for I would say 6 overall.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't see a clear answer, and these aren't easy questions to wrestle with, right? So I don't envy the regulators. I would not want to be this
Yeah,
person
for sure.
trying to come up with policies for these things. That said, I do think Dash is a clear-cut case, and it should be pretty easy for them to identify that we shouldn't be called an AC or a privacy coin. I think we've laid out those some compelling arguments towards
Yeah, now we have a different, like the rapidly changing regulatory environment in the whole world is pretty interesting. It got a lot more interesting recently with El Salvador not only in some ways deregulating cryptocurrency or specifically, I think it's specifically Bitcoin, but they made it legal tender, meaning that it's exempt from capital gains, which
that.
I don't know how long it's going to be until they reevaluate that choice because I don't know. Well, I think they might want to well, we'll see. But also, they're compelling every merchant in the entire country to accept it because it's legal tender and you have to take it. And then
Right.
they're guaranteeing that they're guaranteeing like up to a few hundred million or whatever of fiat conversion to USD of merchants that don't want to hold it via this one company, Lightning Strike, which Strike they must have gotten in on that good old, semi-fascist cronyist deal, to be honest, but like to get in there. But like, can you imagine if Dash got declared the official currency of, let's just say Guatemala, and
Right.
every official remittance channel and every remittance had to be in Dash, and then they would, pay Dash Core Group to like facilitate it, like something
Right.
that would be very strange. So, but since then, there have been quite a few different countries that have announced variations on that same approach of crypto is going to be legal tender in our country. And I'm sure that probably by the time anyone's listening to this, it could be more. And so seeing as like the US is kind of, the regulatory dark ages or like one of the highest up the list, compare of the free nations, right? Then you have this explosion in like South America, for example, about this.
Yeah.
Do you see this as shifting the regulatory environment globally, where first off, the whole idea of crypto capital gains is going, or at least especially for like those small purchases, is out the window, but also to where the entire concept of like cryptocurrencies it just becomes much less regulated. Well, what do you think of this whole trend with like Salvador, etc.?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The whole legal tender question is good, right? I know that there have been a number of lobbying groups and projects in the U.S. even around, exempting um, capital gains or loss reporting on any type of cryptocurrency transaction that was below a certain threshold, be that $200 or $600, that de minimis kind of exemption. And those have been being pushed through Congress. And I always hear rumors about it and people pushing it forward, but I've never seen it happen. So it's kind of interesting to see whether that conversation picks up steam here in the U.S. now that it's basically been implemented in El Salvador. So I'm pretty optimistic about that. Around Dash specifically, I'm also optimistic, right? If Bitcoin is legal tender, and you have payment processors now that have to integrate Bitcoin, well, integrating Dash won't be that difficult. And wherever Dash gets integrated into a cryptocurrency payment processor, it quickly rises to be the number 2 or number 3 coin by volume, just because we are so fast and our
Mm-hmm.
fees are low, and the transactions instantly settle. Right? I mean, compared to try to buy something in El Salvador, and once they try to use the Bitcoin network and realize they're paying however many dollars in fees, or then try to switch to Ethereum. I mean, Dash is really has a compelling case to be included in all of those. So I
Yeah.
know, Ernesto right now is really excited about this. For him, it's now mapping out an institutional approach to it, right? Who are the cryptocurrency payment companies that are entering the space? How does Dash get, implemented on that level versus,
Mm-hmm.
the approach that I think we took 4 years ago in Venezuela, where it was merchant by merchant, right? I don't know if
Yeah.
that's going to. So I know Ernesto is really excited at the prospect of what's happening. Might take a while, right, to spread from El Salvador to other Latin American companies, or countries. But I think this is why we're kind of looking. Our next non-tech hire is going to be someone on the business development team, specifically focused on LATAM. That's
Yeah.
kind of where we see the biggest growth for cryptocurrencies. And we'll see. I'm actually not that optimistic about those type of policies or stances from the government spreading outside of Latin America to, be it Africa or Asia. I don't think that's going to happen in the short to even medium term. Looking 3 to 4 years from now, again, this is the crystal ball where, whenever you make a prediction, it's probably wrong. But
Yeah, of course.
I can't see cryptocurrencies not being a part of the financial world in general. So I think every year you're going to find more and more integrations. I don't see this being a fad or fading away. I think those integrations and connections are only going to become stronger. And people are going to be using cryptocurrencies going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the cat's definitely out of the bag. And if this provides such an economic opportunity, which I believe it does, at least has the potential to, we're going to see a surge, I guess, out of those regions. And I mean, assuming they're not all trying to onboard via Lightning and stuff, which will be a little tricky to say the least. But they, I wonder how soon that would put pressure on places like the U.S. to adapt or die. Probably not in the next couple of years, but like, who knows? Is there going to be, just what glut of businesses is going to go move to South America because of the opportunity? And that'll be interesting to see. But on all that subject, I do know obviously DCG is a US based company, and there's a lot, obviously, we talked about like the taxes on income and stuff like that has to deal with, and all the other kinds of things. And there are some things like, for example, the whole CrayPay integration, which, obviously it's a diff thing, but, I'm sure informed by DCG and stuff. There's it's difficult to, the U.S. regulatory environment seems to be more and more of a pain. Is it ever going to be like a law of diminishing returns of having a U.S. based Dash core group, and especially with like hiring decisions where you have to go through some additional paperwork or something like that, depending on who you hire or whatever?
That's a really good question. I don't have an answer for you there. We do have to, remain compliant with all the regulatory
Mm-hmm.
paperwork and, figuring out, even all the payments I do, I have to make sure those go to legitimate people and so forth. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a paper trail we have to leave, and we have to, comply with laws and regulations here in the U.S. I think the answer to that isn't necessarily, hey, Dash Core Group should pick up and move to a different jurisdiction. It's more about how do we make sure there are enough teams in the Dash network that are kind of, within that ecosystem that are working on various things, right? You have Dash Next in Thailand. How do you create more of these kind of organizations that focus on different areas in the world? And from that perspective, de-risk, right? In my perspective, it'd be nice to have a truly decentralized kind of DAO where you do have other teams working on things separate from Dash Core Group, and Dash Core Group wasn't that one biggest entity, And
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, that would make for a healthier ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, especially with like the regulatory thing
Yeah.
where, and I have to say that this is one of those big challenges with growing is you kind of have to, the smaller something is, so the obviously the larger something is, the more centralized it becomes usually. In the crypto ecosystem, sometimes it's even the opposite. That the smaller it is, the more centralized it is because, you know, can Dash hire two separate but not competing but like complementary different core protocol teams and hire a three other development teams that are on non-core things and a different biz dev department here, and they're all completely decentralized. Can it even afford to do all that? Is Dash big enough for all that? And
Right.
you know, obviously, like I remember in the old days, of 2016, let's just say, of DCG, I remember got petitioned or had like a win to go down to 80% of the treasury. And it was, 80% goes to DCG paying very low rates at low was it $5 to $10 dash. Obviously there's not a lot of money around for that, and that was all
Yeah.
DCG. And then the random community like pizza meetup projects kind of thing. And then over time, things change significantly. Now the fact that there's the incubator as well as DCG, and then there's Dash Next, and then there's the DIF, of course, the Dash Investment
Right.
Foundation, and
Right.
then there's the Dash Trust
Yeah.
that's sort of managing, mostly DCG, but potentially other entities as well
Yeah.
that have like a legal status, and then there's obviously some South American teams going on. There's a bunch of different things happening today, and so now it's just not everything's done by one team, but it's that DCG is handling a lot of like most of the development, the core protocol and platform development, and some core biz dev things. And then we're having the conversation of, well, should we diversify that out? And it's like, well, at a 10 million monthly treasury, that might be a lot easier.
Right.
And
Yeah.
at right now where we're at, it's a little more difficult to have that whole thing happen. But
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic that before you know it, as long as it's like handled in a good way, that
Yeah.
should be great. And it'd be great if like, can you imagine if it was like Dash Core Group that was like the US based thing, and all the biz dev stuff that's outside of Dash Core Group, outside of the country, would be a different entity entirely.
Right. No, and I personally am supportive of that idea. I don't represent Dash Core Group in those opinions, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, we have a diversity of opinions within Dash Core Group as to whether or not that would be
Mm-hmm.
ideal or not. I personally think the more organizations there are under the Dash Network umbrella, independent, the healthier the network is. But some people would disagree with me, saying, it's hard to hold these many organizations accountable, or there'll be a lot of, duplicate work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's tension there. I I'm more of a proponent of the decentralized model personally.
Of course. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're all in the decentralized space after all for good reasons. It's also one thing that as I've been public about before, is I'm very much in favor of modifying the incentive structure of the treasury, so unused coins go to miners and masternodes, so masternodes, when making these decisions, realize the existent truth, which is they're spending their own money on the treasury. It's not just free money. And then they make those kinds of things, not just to make them more stingy on proposals, or more careful on treasury proposals, but also to remove the objection to independently funding things. So, for example, what if a third of the masternodes wanted to pool some of their own money and create, a dash, let's just say, like a Dash Underground, which would be like a Dash adoption group focused on countries like Iran, like Turkey, like these places that might be too spicy for like a US based adoption company to go after because of regulatory reasons and sanctions and all that. And then like the whole network is not on board, but some people will fund that. And then once the entire network doesn't have to oversee the entire network, then that becomes much more scalable, where all you have to do is like, all right, you got to look at Dash Core Group. Are they doing well? How about the incubator? How about maybe a separate incubator? How about the Dash Next? How about the diff? All right, we're done. And then all the other projects out there are still being funded, but by people who don't require the rest of the network's attention, just the people who are backing them, and much more granular accountability. That's kind of my vision, at least. I would really like that to happen.
Yeah, no, I think that you're kind of talking about the governance proposals that
Yeah.
came out. Was it last year now? Was it this year? I can't remember
Must have
now.
been last year.
Yeah, end of last year. I think it's time to most likely revisit some of those conversations and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
see whether or not there's something that can be done um, that's palatable, A, and B, good for the network and can kind of increase the efficiency with which funds are being distributed. So I'm pretty optimistic there. I think Dash Core Group at one point had spearheaded some of those discussions. I think it's time to revisit those. Hopefully, at some
Mm-hmm.
point this summer, we kind of start engaging in a lot of those conversations. I know within Dash Core Group, Ryan was the one, um, the CEO, obviously, everyone knows, was the one who drove those conversations. So hopefully, he has a little bit of time on his schedule to focus on that because I think it is an important topic overall.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we're about ready to start wrapping this up. Any final thoughts or things you'd like people to know, or observations, or maybe an impromptu haiku or whatever?
No, no, all set. I'm just, pretty happy with where we are from a financial standpoint. I sometimes check out Telegram messages and just in general get a feel of what the community is thinking. And there were some open questions around where Dash Core Group is from a financial standpoint. And I was really surprised by that, given how low our expense run rate is compared to where the price is today, and given how high our reserves are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty happy camper right now from a finance perspective.
Yeah. Well,
In terms of,
that's a great thing about being, for example, here on the podcast is people don't really read financial reports, yet they have
right.
questions that the answers they're in, they lie in there, and they
Yeah.
people are very social creatures. They ask the person next to them, and if there's no
Right.
person next to them, or I don't know, the person next to them doesn't know, then they don't know, and so
Hmm.
that's why it helps to just get out. And obviously, law of diminishing returns of like, is your comparative advantage better spent actually doing all this accounting work, or is it just hanging out in forums in case someone has a question that might have been answered elsewhere? But
Yeah.
it's always
Right.
a complex balance. But
Yeah.
anyway, I love to absolutely thank you for being on. You can come back on anytime, of course. I always enjoy your insight on the parts of the space that some people like. The questions surrounding those might be a little bit boring, like people, finances and regulation, taxes. People
Yeah.
don't care. They're not as sexy as like code, but
Right.
but the answers to that are very interesting, and I think that
Yeah.
I really like where we are. So, if you're listening, once again, I have to remind you that this is not exactly live. I'm not in front of you right now, and it is Friday, which is after party time. So, if you want into the after party, I'm not going to be there, but you go to the dash Discord, which is stay-e.com. You go in there, you start asking around, is there an after party? If so, can I come in? And someone might put you in if they're actually having it, because I'm sure these kinds of discussions generate more discussions. And whenever this drops and people are actually, they're going to be like, well, I'm sure there's a ton, especially around like the coin join and DeFi type discussions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot. So yeah, feel free to seek that out. I will see you guys in 2 weeks, hopefully to talk to the one and only Arden, which should be fantastic. So anyway, thanks again, Glenn, for coming, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Take
No
care.
problem.